My name is Naomi Russell. I'm 34. By trade, I'm an architect, a designer of spaces where light and function collide. By habit, I'm a mother, fiercely protective, endlessly patient, and perpetually exhausted. My son, Oliver, is 5, with a mind full of wonder and the kind of stubbornness that could move mountains. My life orbits around him. My boyfriend, Stephen Garcia, and the invisible gravity of family expectations that has always seemed to follow me. I remember mornings where Oliver counts the bubbles in his cereal like they are treasures. I watch him, tired but present, and I remind myself that these small rituals are my anchor. Stephen, busy in his own world of project deadlines, often texts me little jokes about work emails, a quiet reminder that I'm not entirely alone in the chaos. But the rest of my family, well, they operate in a different orbit. My sister, Claire, is the golden one. She's 30, a social media strategist with a presence that's effortless and polished. Our mother calls her the star, and she moves through life as if the light itself bends toward her. Beautiful, distant, perfect. Everyone else just revolves. And me, I've always been the coat rack, the one who shows up, fixes, plans, and quietly absorbs both criticism and expectation. It started in small ways. As kids, Claire would organize school projects with flair while I meticulously measured ingredients for baking assignments, silently hoping someone would notice. My father would chuckle at Claire's flair, dismissing my corrections with a kind of fond tolerance that always stung more than it soothed. My mother would glide over tables in our home, praising Claire's taste, then glance at me as if to say, "Don't overthink it." And I did. Overthinking was my default. Being reliable became my identity. I fix sinks. I cook meals. I organize events. I take Oliver to school, all while carrying an invisible ledger of thanks owed. The irony is that food and design, things I love, are honest. They respond to effort, not favoritism, and yet, in my family, effort always seemed to land with a thud. The first small scrape that left a sting came 4 years ago. I had Oliver for a Sunday dinner at Claire's apartment. I brought soup, simple chicken soup, because he had sniffles. For a moment, everything felt normal. Warm bowls, spoons clinking, Oliver fishing for the biggest carrot like a little pirate on a mission. Then my mother said, "Naomi, maybe next time make something, I don't know, more sophisticated. Claire's friends expect elevated flavors." I paused, spoon hovering midair. This was chicken soup for a sick child. Claire laughed softly, her voice a melody of reassurance that felt more like dismissal. "Don't be defensive. We love your food." My father added, "You should practice more plating. People eat with their eyes." Oliver reached for my hand under the table. I smiled, kept my voice calm, and noted the words like a small scrape across my chest. From that day, I began to track the asks, the subtle extractions of my time, my money, my energy. The requests were small, a tray of hors d'oeuvres here, a dessert there, always framed as opportunities. But the math of it, the unspoken tally, grew heavy. I fronted groceries, paid for ingredients, stayed hours beyond my own bedtime, and rarely was it acknowledged. Every party, every gathering, every small favor became a lesson in invisibility. Claire would call with instructions. "Naomi, can you make bite-sized appetizers for my client meeting? Something impressive but low cost. No onions, no garlic, no carbs, and nothing that requires dairy." I'd smile, laugh politely, and nod, internalizing every unreasonable restriction. Stephen saw it, sometimes silently, sometimes in the form of texts. "Are you sure you need to do all that?" And I'd reply, "It's fine, it's family." But the word fine was heavier than any ledger could measure. I remember the nights I'd scrub our kitchen counters, folding Oliver's tiny socks into perfect fists, tasting the bitterness of my own restraint. That was the first scrape of the match. Not anger, not drama, just quiet accumulation of injustice, layer by layer. It wasn't until a Tuesday night, alone in our apartment with Oliver at his mother's, that I realized just how much I had absorbed. I tallied expenses, babysitters, gas, ingredients, hours of unpaid labor. The number hit $4,186, and for the first time I whispered to myself, "Enough." The quiet of the apartment echoed with more than the radiator ticking. It echoed with the thought that I could finally draw a line. Boundaries, respect, agency, not revenge, closure. My heart, oddly, felt steady. Even as I sit here thinking back, I can see the foreshadowing in every small ask, every disguised request, every subtle demand. The story isn't just about money. It's about being seen, being valued, being allowed to exist beyond service to others. And yet, the story is just beginning. The matches are lit, the ledger is open, and the family dynamic is about to change in ways I haven't fully realized yet. Over the years, the pattern hardened like concrete. Every holiday, every birthday, every casual Sunday dinner became a measure of how much I could give and how little I would be acknowledged. Claire's voice, light and airy over the phone, often carried that hidden weight. Naomi, can you handle the dessert table? Something stunning but inexpensive, no nuts, no sugar, nothing that will ruin the presentation. I'd smile, nod, and note the invisible cost in my mental ledger. There were weekends when Stephen would glance at me over coffee and say, "You don't have to do everything." But in my family, "don't have to" rarely applied. It was less a suggestion than a test. If I refused, I risked disapproval. If I complied, I risked invisibility. Every request disguised as casual, every compliment with a hidden dagger, added to a slowly growing pressure. I remember one summer barbecue. Claire had invited friends I barely knew. I had promised Oliver a trip to the aquarium. His little hand, sticky with anticipation, pressed against mine as I explained why we couldn't stay for the whole afternoon. My mother texted, "Family comes first." And for 3 long days afterward, I felt the cold shoulder of silent judgment, only to receive a postscript later. "We forgive you. Just let us know sooner next time." Small scrapes became larger ones, and I became meticulous. Every borrowed dollar, every favor, every extra hour of labor, I tracked it. My notes on my phone became a ledger of invisible debts. The $250, advance for a party we were never reimbursed for. The $412.79 I spent on ingredients for New Year's Eve 4 years ago, the time I gave away, counted in hours I would never reclaim. And it wasn't just money, it was my attention, my presence, my emotional labor. Claire called me repeatedly, testing boundaries without ever naming them. "Naomi, can you handle the appetizers? Oh, and don't forget, it has to be gluten-free. My client is very picky." She laughed lightly at my jokes, the type of laughter that feels like permission, to serve, to work, to bend. Meanwhile, Stephen remained my quiet anchor. When I arrived home exhausted, he would meet me with a cup of tea and a soft smile. "You did enough today," he'd say. Enough. A word that in my family's lexicon was rarely spoken aloud, but even his reassurance couldn't shield me from the slow erosion of my energy, the constant friction of demands, the subtle humiliation hidden beneath compliments. Then there were the texts, the endless reminders of family needs. "Can you bring a salad to Aunt Leia's birthday?" "We'd love you to cater a small dinner, Naomi. You're so talented." And each time the words disguised a deeper expectation. Labor without thanks, gifts without acknowledgement, time without consideration. I started to feel the pattern in my bones. The small asks were never small. They were breadcrumbs leading to a feast I was never allowed to enjoy, only to prepare. And for the first time I noticed a simmering frustration inside me that no polite smile could cool. Then came Rachel, Stephen's ex-girlfriend. I hadn't expected her to appear, yet even her presence, though brief, made me acutely aware of how my life with Stephen could be scrutinized, judged, and compared. She wasn't a threat in any real sense, but in my world of controlled perfection, she became a mirror reflecting my insecurities. Am I enough? Am I seen? Am I worthy of my own agency? The tension built quietly, like heat under a pot. I realized I was holding more than I should, and yet I still showed up, still smiled, still chopped, measured, prepped, baked, and built. Every time I did, I reminded myself that love and duty were not always the same thing. My family was addicted to my compliance, to my invisible labor, to my silent acceptance of imbalance. By the end of this part of my life, I knew 2 things. The microdaggers were cumulative, layering frustration, hurt, and the faint sting of betrayal. There would be a reckoning. I didn't know how it would happen yet, or whether my family would see it coming. All I knew was that the ledger, the record of unpaid time, unnoticed effort, and invisible gifts, was no longer invisible to me. The small asks were building, stacking like a tower that would eventually collapse under its own weight. And in that quiet understanding, the first seed of clarity took root. I began to imagine a world where my labor, my energy, my time, my children, and my boundaries were respected. Not as a gift, not as a favor, but as a right. It happened one Tuesday night. Oliver was at his mother's for a sleepover, and Stephen had gone out to pick up groceries. I sat alone at our kitchen table, bills stacked to one side, my laptop open to a blank spreadsheet, and a Tupperware of cold roast chicken in front of me. For hours, I added everything. Ingredients I'd purchased, time spent prepping, babysitters booked to allow me to cook, gas money for trips to family gatherings. The total hit 4,086. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. The number wasn't just a sum of dollars. It was a record of years of silent extraction, of small favors framed as opportunities, of hidden humiliation disguised as family love. For once, I wasn't rounding down. I wasn't excusing the requests. I saw it all. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. The ledger didn't make me angry. It made me steady. It made me capable. I titled the spreadsheet, Boundaries. I would not subsidize family events anymore. I would not work for free. Oliver came first, always. No was a complete sentence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was clarity, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through a long winter. I didn't send the spreadsheet immediately. Families are sticky. They cling and tug in ways that make it difficult to assert autonomy. But I knew the next New Year's Eve, the next holiday, the next request, I would not bend blindly. The escalation began in small ways. A group chat message, lightly framed, could send a ripple through my calm. We'd love you to handle the turkey for Thanksgiving. Just a small thing. How many guests? I asked. Just a few, they said, which in family code meant 30 people. What's the budget? Silence. Don't be crass, my mother wrote finally. Crass? No. Adult. I knew the distinction, and I was ready to uphold it. The microdaggers piled up over years. Naomi, can you move your car? Our guests' cars are nicer. Naomi, don't use the good knives. Naomi, could you make something more sophisticated? I had become the family's invisible bill, the one they didn't pay, but whose presence subsidized every event, every celebration, every Instagram-ready moment Claire wanted captured. It was time to make it visible. I prepared a formal invoice, clean, professional, detailed. Labor, 8 hours per event at $45 hour. Ingredients, $350, $500 per gathering. Total, $4,186. No emotion, no drama, just numbers, just truth, just a line that would never again be crossed. And I knew that when I sent it, there would be calls, texts, attempts to manipulate, to gaslight, to tug at nostalgia. But the ledger wasn't for them. It was for me. Proof that my time, my labor, my energy, my very presence had value. The first real test would come on New Year's Eve. The group chat buzzed before noon. This year, we're celebrating at Claire's place. No room for you or Oliver, my mother wrote. Leave the kids with a nanny and come cook dinner as usual, Claire added nonchalantly. Don't make us feel bad. We still want our gifts, my father chimed in. I stared at the screen. My throat went dry, the way it does when bread comes out too early, pale, unbaked, and still demanded. I packed Oliver's overnight bag for his mother's house, including tiny party favors for a countdown at 5:00 p.m. in our living room. He laughed as he blew into paper horns, counting down with me, 10, 9, 8. Then I drove to Claire's loft, carrying my tote filled with knives, measuring cups, and the invoice that would change the dynamics forever. The elevator opened to laughter, perfume, and the unmistakable heat of an oven misused. Claire greeted me with her usual air kiss. You made it. The kitchen's a disaster. I was calm. I'm here as a guest. Claire laughed lightly. You're funny. Mom's in the living room. Mom looked at me like a late delivery. Dad was scrolling on his phone, the usual. I placed the invoice on the counter, my voice level, precise. You told me there was no room for my son, but there's room for my labor. That's not how my life works. The room quieted. Aunt Leia hovered like a diplomat, but I stayed steady. My words weren't about revenge. They were about closure. For the first time in years, the ledger wasn't invisible, and for the first time, I felt visible. The moment I placed the invoice on the counter, the air shifted. It was heavy, quiet, like a music track suddenly cut mid-verse. Claire's eyebrows lifted, her usual smile faltering. "Is this a joke?" she asked, half laughing, half stern. "No," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's a boundary." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes flashing. "Don't embarrass us," she whispered, almost a plea. I met her gaze calmly. "You told me there was no room for Oliver, but there was room for my labor. That's not how my life works." Dad scoffed, trying to mask disbelief. "It's just one night." "It's years," I said. "Years of invisible labor, unacknowledged effort, and constant request disguised as favors. This invoice, it's just a record of that. It's not about revenge, it's about respect." Claire stepped closer, voice dropping. "You're ruining my night." I glanced at the half-prepped ingredients, the oven misfiring, the kitchen that had been mine to command for years, and I realized something. This night, this confrontation, wasn't about dishes, desserts, or dinner. It was about me, my time, my children, my boundaries. "Your night was built on a person you don't respect," I said softly yet firmly. "I'm not cooking for free. I'm here as a guest for 1 hour. If you want a caterer, here's my rate sheet." A heavy silence fell. Aunt Leia hovered nearby, awkward and uncertain. Mom's voice shook slightly. "We are family." "Exactly," I said, "which is why I'm saying this calmly. I will not subsidize family events anymore. My kids come first. No is a complete sentence." Claire's face tightened. "You always make things about money." "No," I replied, voice steady. "You make things about my time, my work, my labor. I'm making it about respect." Mom's jaw clenched. Dad leaned back with a warning glance. "If you walk out, don't come back." "That's a boundary too," I said, gathering my coat. I placed the invoice flat on the counter like a truce flag. Numbers, dates, hours, all visible. I turned to leave. Mom added, "We still expect our gifts." I paused. My hand on the door handle, I looked back. "You're getting one. It's called me not lying to myself anymore." The elevator doors closed. In the reflective steel, I saw myself tired, yes, but unbroken. For the first time in years, I felt invisible weight lift from my shoulders. Midnight came. Strangers cheered. Fireworks bloomed. I sat on the couch with a bowl of reheated soup, texting Oliver and Stephen, "Happy New Year." The first day of the year brought 23 missed calls, 41 texts. Mom, Dad, Claire. Each trying, manipulating, pleading. I ignored them, turning my focus inward. I spent the afternoon making pancakes with Oliver in our little living room fort. Joy, not duty. Presence, not performance. The days that followed were a parade of manipulation attempts. Nostalgic texts, guilt-laden calls, veiled threats. But I remained steady. Slowly, the tone softened. From anger to manipulation to a careful attempt at reconciliation. Mom texted, "I miss the kids. Can we see them Saturday? No cooking, just visit." I replied, "We'll come. Pizza, board games, 2 hours." Oliver laughed, playing a joke about broccoli that made Dad, who had come along, laugh genuinely. For 15 minutes, the past wait was replaced by presence. Checks arrived, partial payments, notes, and then the final balance. Not triumph, not revenge, just balance. My labor acknowledged, my boundaries honored. My family hadn't changed, not really, but the rules had. I learned that day what it felt like to exist on my own terms, to say no without guilt, to assert my worth, my time, and my love on my own schedule. And for the first time, I realized love doesn't demand invisibility, respect does. After the confrontation, the quiet was different. Not empty, just wide. The constant tug of obligation, the invisible ledger I'd carried for years, was gone. The calls and messages didn't stop overnight, but I responded on my terms, not theirs. I started doing small things I hadn't had time for in years. A parent-teacher meeting for Oliver, where I actually sat and listened instead of hovering, worrying about my next family obligation. Teaching Oliver how to crack an egg one-handed, laughing when shells broke into the bowl, until he finally did it right and cheered like he'd scored a goal. Stephen slipped into the kitchen beside me, apron on, and for a moment we were just a family, not a set of obligations. I reintroduced routines I had shelved for years. Morning runs along the river, slow stretches, dinners where we didn't count calories or impress anyone, just food that felt like home. The ledger of labor and expectation became a cautionary tale, a reminder to protect my energy, my children, and my relationships. Mom, Dad, and Claire tried to reinsert themselves into my life, but the rules were different now. Calls came, polite, careful, testing boundaries like soft probes. What time is the recital? Do you want the kids Saturday? And I answered steadily, calmly, without apology. Oliver learned the new rhythm too. Boundaries are like oven mitts, he said one morning, echoing something I'd once explained in passing. And he understood. Saying no didn't mean you stopped loving someone. It meant you were protecting what mattered most. Family gatherings were no longer automatic claims on my labor. If I went as a guest. I brought store-bought muffins to brunch, and Claire, standing by the window with her Bloody Mary, said, "You've changed." "Not really," I said. "I just stopped paying for the same lesson." She rolled her eyes. "You think you're better than us?" "I think I'm better to myself," I replied. She didn't like it, but she didn't demand a cutting board either. The calls and messages still buzzed occasionally, but the emotional tone was lighter. Normal questions, logistical checks, no guilt, no manipulation. And every night after Oliver was tucked in, Stephen by my side, I sat at the table where I once tallied family debt, now planning menus, grocery lists, and life routines with intention, not obligation. I wrote a new kind of list: routines, school drop-offs, workouts, Oliver's learning milestones, quiet time, moments with Stephen. Boundaries, yes, but also joy. Some nights I thought of the tiny loft kitchen, Claire's disappointed eyes, Mom's tight voice, Dad's passive-aggressive warnings. I didn't thrill at them, didn't gloat, I just remembered. And it settled me. People say kitchens are about fire. They are. But kitchens, like life, are also about timing. Knowing when to stir, when to wait, when to remove the pot from the heat. I had learned that, finally, with my family, with my children, with myself. Life didn't flip. It didn't explode. It clicked into place. My name is Naomi Russell. I'm 34, an architect by trade, a mother fiercely protective of her son, and a partner with a man who stands beside me. I know my worth. I know my boundaries. I know my love. Claire still posts perfection. Mom still calls with advice. Dad still grills in the backyard. But now they ask what works for me. And sometimes my answer is nothing. For Oliver, I am present, unburdened, steady. For Stephen, I am whole. For myself, I am finally visible. Boundaries, like oven mitts, protect us from burns. And finally, I have learned to measure carefully, to serve only what is mine, and to keep my own table full.